Hello, friends. Welcome back to A Sweet Taste of Hardscapes, our monthly free community class where we're learning the system of Reiki to be rooted, to be spacious, to be connected, and to remember ourselves. And we're doing that by exploring and practicing various elements of the foundation of the system of Reiki from the perspective of its Japanese origins, exploring some of the traditions and practices, philosophical perspectives, historical points that built the foundation on which the system of Reiki was built 100 years ago. And then we're taking those aspects of this practice and exploring how to bring them alive in our life today, to have the system of Reiki readily available to us, to understand it, have a deep relationship with it so that it is at our fingertips, it is on our heart and available to us in the midst of the joys and challenges of our day-to-day life. Because if we can't access a system of spiritual and meditative practice in the midst of the challenges of our life, then it is of limited usefulness to us. And so we're here to deepen that relationship, deepen our understanding of Reiki, and to do some practice together in community. So I'm really glad you're here, and I'm excited to share this month's topic with you, which is one that is really dear to me and is also, from my perspective, really one of the most essential foundational elements that we actually can look at when we're working with the system of Reiki. And that is the role and relationship of nature itself, not only in the system of Reiki, but in our life in general. This is a topic that we circle around to over and over again, and that is a through line in really all of what I teach and practice. It's really an essential aspect of building our relationship with Reiki and rebuilding our relationship with ourselves and the world. So I wanted to begin with a little bit of context from our kind of more modern understanding of the relationship between we, modern folk, and the natural world, and why we might want to pay attention to the nature of that relationship and make some shifts in it. This quote comes from Richard Louv, the author of the book Last Child in the Woods. And this book explores what he has termed nature deficit disorder, a series of symptoms and outcomes to our physical, mental, emotional health that has been identified in recent years as being associated with disconnection from nature. And so Richard begins by describing this disorder in this way. Nature deficit disorder is not a medical diagnosis, but a useful term, a metaphor to describe what many of us believe are the human costs of alienation from nature. Diminished use of the senses, attention difficulties, higher rates of physical and emotional illnesses, a rising rate of myopia, child and adult obesity, vitamin D deficiency, and other maladies. This is a wide range of symptoms across physical, emotional, and mental experiences in our life, and yet all of them have been tied to the experience of disconnecting from nature. If we think about our evolution as a species, the evolution of the whole world, all of us, all of we animals in the world, we are nature, right? We're not different from it. We're not separate from it. And we spent the majority of our existence on this planet in absolute interconnection with the natural cycles of the world. They govern our lives. They helped us to understand how to sustain ourselves and to survive. Beyond that, how to understand ourselves philosophically, spiritually, in relationship to both the seen and the unseen world. Beyond our base physical needs and survival needs, our relationship with nature helps us to understand who and what we are, helps us to feel part of the web of life, something beyond our physical, independent, sovereign existence, helps us to feel bigger than we physically actually are. Truly, our understanding of our relationship to nature and the embodied experience of feeling that connection is a huge part of us feeling our purpose as a living being, helping us feel that we actually are here for a reason. And so it's no wonder that religious and spiritual and philosophical traditions the world over, back in time and up to today, really emphasizes nature as not only our, the literal interactions with the natural world, but as a really powerful point of metaphor and perspective taking in spiritual and philosophical traditions. All of us, if we go back far enough in our history, come from people who were intimately interconnected with the natural world and understood ourselves to be an animal of this world, part of those cycles. Those understandings come through culture in lots of different ways, get expressed in many different forms, but there's these through lines that we can see between many traditions. This is something that's personally super fascinating to me. I've always really loved finding those points of intersection and commonality between lots of different traditions. And this particular topic, this topic of connection with nature, is a place where we find through lines just in every tradition. And so what I wanted to do for today is to explore some of those through lines as they come through the system of Reiki. And if we're looking at that tradition, we really need to begin with the heart, the foundation of not only the system of Reiki, but of Japanese spiritual culture in general, which is the practice of Shinto, the indigenous spiritual traditions of Japan. The esoteric Buddhist traditions that are also powerfully present inside the system of Reiki, and that many of the symbols and elements and practices that we experience inside of Reiki from its origins is also intimately connected with Shinto. Historically speaking, Japan is a place where there's a lot of really organic coming together of other systems of thought with the indigenous practices of Shinto. And esoteric Buddhism is one of the oldest and one of the most powerful examples of that. And so we're going to look at some specific places where these philosophical ideas come through. And then we're going to spend some time thinking about how that connects with our own lineages, our own traditions, and then do a little bit of practice within the system of Reiki. And I'm going to bring up some images to help us do that. So we are here together today to explore plugging back into the cycles of nature. And one of the resources I have found extremely helpful in drawing these through lines, finding these connections specifically within Shinto, is this book. And so I'm going to be drawing heavily from this book today, The Essence of Shinto, Japan's Spiritual Heart by Motohisa Yamakage. This book really does a brilliant job of presenting the system of Shinto, the philosophical and spiritual lineage of Shinto, in a way that is reasonably understandable and accessible, particularly to a Western mind. Shinto is so ancient and it's so embedded into the absolute fabric of the Japanese people that it is actually quite challenging to describe in certain ways because it is so inherent. It's one of those things that's just part of the water that is drunk and the air that is breathed, and therefore can be challenging to explain to folks outside of the culture. And so I think Yamakage does a beautiful job of that in this book. I highly recommend it for anybody interested in following this thread. And so Yamakage, right in the start, connects this investigation of Shinto as a nature-based animistic practice with practices across the world, and acknowledges that in recent times there's been a resurging interest in exploring these commonalities and exploring our relationship with nature through a spiritual lens. And so he says that the return to the idea of Gaia, Earth, is a radical challenge to this way of looking at the world, this way being the world as a commodity, not of central importance to our lives. It reminds us that we are part of nature rather than above or beyond it. And this is a theme that has always come through really strongly from my most treasured Reiki teachers. This idea, this reminder that we are nature. We are an animal of this world. We are of the physical and non-seen stuff of this world, of this earth. that we are not above it, we're not beyond it, we're not separate from it, we're not just observers of it, we are it. And our lives are greatly improved when we live in accordance with that connection. And so, in my words, to summarize that, Shinto is really the essence of Reiki. It's the very foundation on which both Japanese esoteric Buddhism and the system of Reiki are built. And it's related to the nature-based essence of the indigenous spirituality that we each carry from our different cultural lineages. And it does us a great service to explore those connections, those commonalities, and those through lines of the connection to nature with our own essential lineages. So I wanted to follow up those ideas with the words of another teacher of mine, Taijo Sensei, who runs the Seattle Koyasan Shingon Temple. Shingon is one of several essentially Japanese forms of Buddhism. It was one of the first that was developed really as an intentional blending of the Chinese forms of Buddhism that came into the country in the 6th century with the existing indigenous Shinto practices. And it's a really beautiful blending of those two things. And Taijo Sensei, who is Japanese from Japan, and who is practicing and operating the temple in Seattle, has a really grounded perspective on these ideas of how do we bring together traditions from different places, allow them to come alive in our own practice, and allow them to be in integrity with themselves and with us. And I just really appreciate the way that he phrased that. And so I just wanted to share his words with you. So Taijo Sensei shares that Buddhism works when it is localized. In Japan, there was Shintoism and its deities. Buddhism has always paid respect to local Shinto kami, kami being the word for spirit or the divine or gods. In the US, who are the indigenous deities? Native American spirits. Therefore, I chant expressing our gratitude to Native American spirits. And so one of the questions that we sit with in our classes and in our practices here at Heartscapes is the question of who are the kami of the land on which you live, on the land of your ancestors. And then we invite them to teach us. And what I mean by that is that many of us have come to the lands on which we live from other places historically in terms of our lineage. So my people came from England, from Wales, from Scotland, eventually migrated to the United States. There's a lot of challenging history around those kinds of migrations into this land. And the land that I live on now is the land of the Nisenan people, the Maidu people of Central California. And so part of my practice, an incredibly important part of my practice, is building my connection, my relationship, my understanding of the spiritual presence that is here on the land on which I live, and to understanding myself as a visitor on these lands. Even though I've lived here my whole life, spiritually, I'm a visitor on these lands. And that building of relationship happens in a lot of different ways. It happens through spiritual practice. It happens through physical relationship with Indigenous people in my region, contributing my efforts and my resources to those communities, and just really in terms of education. For our purposes here, I wanted to emphasize the practice of, through our spiritual practices, through our meditative practices, through our practices of observation and being with the lands that we are on, building our relationship with those lands for what they are, for understanding that these practices that have come from other places and have met us here where we are in this moment are best when they are, as Taijo Sensei says, localized. When they are allowed to be dynamic, they're allowed to take on a certain amount of the form of the space in which they are growing. Now, that doesn't mean that we lose track of the cultural and historical roots of the practice. This is the challenge, the kind of difficult other side of that coin, because it can be very tempting to take a system of practice like Reiki and say, well, I'm not in Japan. I'm here in this time and place. I'm going to just make it my own and make it what I need it to be. And in doing that, we can very easily lose track of what the practice actually is, what its intention was, what the elements are, and why they're there. And so a huge part of our practice here at Heartscapes is learning as much as we can and practicing as much as we can those original forms, the elements of the system of Reiki in alignment with the intentions and purposes that they originally served. And then bringing that alongside of our lives in this time and place, our relationship with the land that we're on, with the demands of our life in this moment, and finding those places of intersection, those places of commonality. And a really beautiful place to do that is in this area of coming into relationship with the energy, the spirits, the unseen um, characteristics of the land on which we live. This involves being in direct relationship with the natural world all around us, which we can do wherever we are. You know, I live in a suburb that is surrounded by farms, that has a lot of natural spaces that have been cultivated by people. I am very blessed to have a decent amount of yard space for cultivating a garden and lots of trees in the area. Where I moved here from, there were very few of those spaces. It was much more of a city, much more of an urban space. Even there was powerful, regenerative, just restorative opportunities to observe and to be in connection with the living world, because nature is us. So wherever we are in connection and relationship with the natural world, however that shows up. So there are practices that can help us to do that, and there's great benefit to that. One of the most powerful benefits that has come through my life as I have been in this process of really marrying my Reiki practice, which for the first few years of my Reiki practice was very disconnected from my daily life and very disconnected from the natural world around me. It was very much about escaping those things, to be honest. It was very much about going into this kind of healing trance that took me away from my daily life, that took me away from the place and moment that I was in. I know now that was, part of a longer process of healing from traumatic experiences, and that slowly and over time, and by aligning myself better with these origins of the practice, I realized that the gift that the system of Reiki has for us is to align us with right now, this moment, who we are in this time and place, and to allow ourselves the spaciousness and the resources to be fully present in that. And so building that process of alignment with nature and building that in relationship to the land on which I live, one of the incredible benefits of that is that by just paying attention in those contexts, I have over time realigned the rhythms of my life with the natural rhythms of the world. That means a lot of different things. I won't go into a lot of examples, but happy to have conversations with you separately about that if you're interested. Certainly, though, one of the easiest places to point that in is in my relationship with food. I've aligned myself with eating seasonally, with really sourcing my food from as close to my home as possible, growing as much of it as I can in my garden. And the emotional, mental, and physical health benefits that I have derived just from that change alone has been tremendous. Also acknowledging, recognizing, and then operating in alignment with the ways in which my energy is different in different seasons. The way that I feel in winter is very different from the way that I feel in spring. I would imagine that's true for you as well. And when we are disconnected from those rhythms and we try to keep the same pace that our modern life tells us we need to have, which is often highly focused on productivity, on doing, on being, on going faster, on doing more, on ever increasing our yield in whatever it is. This is not a sustainable way of being, and it's not a natural way of being for us. And so we see huge levels in anxiety, huge levels in burnout, huge levels in substance use to help us to keep up this pace that is incredibly unnatural to us. It's quite literally killing us in many, many ways. And again, by this simple practice of paying attention in a focused meditative way through the system of Reiki to my relationship to the seasons and the cycles of the world has had tremendous health benefits for me, particularly in terms of my mental health. So just a few examples of direct benefits of just paying attention and then letting what we notice about the world and its rhythms move us in a particular direction. So coming back to this idea of the through lines that connect the system of Reiki, its Shinto nature-based origins and lineages that many of us are coming from, wanted to just share a couple of examples of a particular central idea inside of the system of Reiki and how it shows up in other places. And that central idea is that divine energy, that spirit, that God is inside of us, that we are not separate from divine energy, that the energy that animates and connects all of life, which we see as divinity in action, we see as spirit or the universe or God or however we define that, is not separate from us. It is within us. The system of Reiki is about remembering that, about turning back inward and reconnecting with that divine center, that divine essence that we all are at all times, that we get distracted from, that we get disconnected from in terms of where we're paying attention, but that we can always return to. The elements and practices in the system of Reiki are designed to help us remember the wholeness of our true self, that divine essence that we all are. And that is an idea that exists in many cultures, not all. There are certainly spiritual perspectives that really do see the divine as outside of us, something that we are striving towards, something that we are eventually going to achieve, but that is not inherent in us in our daily life. So paying attention to those places where we do see this through line, I just wanted to give you a couple of examples. So these are the lyrics of a song by a modern Navajo musician who goes by the name of Don Boy. And this song is called Night Chant. This is just a little piece of the lyrics. And we see here this beautiful chant, this beautiful incantation of this idea. In this version, the divine is articulated as beauty, which I just absolutely love. And Don Boy says, "Beauty before me, with it I wander. Beauty behind me, with it I wander. Beauty below me, with it I wander. And beauty above me, with it I wander." So we see this invocation of beauty or the divine or spirit being everywhere, within me, in front of me, behind me, below me, above me. And the sweetness of that, the sense of being held, of being supported by this beauty is very palpable. And so shifting attention from the lands that I live on in the United States, and when I kind of looked back into my ethnic lineages where I am from, I found many versions of this idea inside of Celtic traditions that are part of my lineage. And just as an example, there's St. Patrick's Prayer through Ireland, where we have the divine as conceptualized as Christ. And this prayer says, "Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ when I arise." And so we see this same through line, the same idea of the divine, the kami, the spirits of the land being within me, around me, everywhere, at all times, sleeping, waking, moving, at all times, with me, available to me. And just as a kind of historical point of connection, cultural point of connection, in the Celtic world, when Christianity first came into the British Isles and into Scotland and Ireland, this was one of the rare places and times in history for a time in those regions where Christianity came along beside the nature-based pagan traditions that were long existing in those places, much like the Shinto traditions in Japan. And Christianity came alongside, and the people involved with that merging were able to put the two traditions side by side, blend them in ways that felt authentic to the people of the land on which that blending was happening. And so you see in early Celtic Christian cultural expressions and spiritual expressions this really beautiful blending of the nature-based Celtic traditions and Christianity. And you see that in this prayer, where you can see the acknowledgement of spirituality as being inherently who and what we are. This changed significantly at a certain point in the history of that region, where a version of Christianity that is more commonly seen across the world, where God and spirit is seen as very much separate from humanity, and that the goal of the practice is to unite with spirit in the afterlife. It's a very different philosophical perspective, right? That God is in the trees, in the rocks, all around us, including inside of me, and that my spiritual practice is about remembering that, very much aligned with the origins of the system of Reiki. And that concept is summarized really beautifully by Yamakage here in this quote, that Shinto is the path through which we seek to realize ourselves fully as human beings by acquiring the noble characteristics of kami, the powers of the spiritual dimension. And so we see this guidance that through the practice of this system, Shinto in this case, Reiki in our case, that was built upon Shinto practice, that the purpose of it is to fully realize ourselves as human beings by acquiring, acknowledging, remembering our inherent characteristics of the spiritual dimension of kami. This really points us to the purpose of the practice. And within the system of Reiki, we have the outcomes of that practice described so beautifully in the precepts, that when we have realized ourselves fully as human by acquiring the noble characteristics of kami, we will walk through our life unattached to fear, unattached to anger, deeply rooted in gratitude, diligently true to ourselves, and compassionate with ourselves and all others. The Reiki precepts. And then for a more specific way in which this shows up in Shinto, we have the acknowledgement that for more than 3,000 years, the Japanese have believed that kami, the powers of the spiritual dimension, can make contact with human beings through trees. And so I want to pause here and invite you to do a little bit of journaling. So there's a couple of prompts here on the screen. So I just invite you to jump into one or both of these prompts as a way of just starting to reflect on your own experiences with these topics. So firstly, I want to invite you to reflect on your experiences within nature. And nature broadly defined. So this could be, out in the woods somewhere, out on the ocean, or it can be in your backyard. It can be walking through a city park. It can be walking down a city street and observing the birds and the trees. It doesn't matter how small that interaction or that experience with nature, as long as you noticed it, paid attention to it. And when you reflect on those experiences, notice how they impacted the way you feel in your body, in your emotions, in your mind. And so for this journaling practice, I'll just invite you to just take as long as you need to. If you're watching this class on the replay, you can press pause here. Just take as long as you need to take a few moments to reflect back on some of those key experiences in nature and just notice as you remember them, the sensations in your body, the way that your emotions feel, the thoughts in your mind, and just spend some time reflecting on that in your journal. Secondly, I invite you to think about whether you're conscious of something that you have learned from your observations or experiences with nature that's helped you to better understand or navigate your life. I named a couple from my own experience a moment ago. Realigning with and noticing the cycles of nature and the ways in which the energy of the world is different in different seasons really helped me to understand my own energetic cycles and how I need to be with myself in different seasons. So that's an example. There's many, many, many different ways that we can learn something from observing nature that actually helps us to better navigate our life. And so I invite you to reflect on that and do some journaling about that. Take as long as you need to, and then come back to me when you're done. Okay, I hope that was a valuable reflection for you, and that you were able to give yourself a little bit of time to explore those questions. If you want to share anything that came up for you in that journaling, I would really love to hear it. I'd love to see what came up for you and reflect back what I noticed in it, if that's useful. So just invite you to share that with me either through the chat, through the comments below, over email. I'd love to continue the conversation. All right, so that gives us, I think, a pretty decent overview of the connections that I'm trying to draw here between the system of Reiki, between the traditions that form its foundation, and between our current life and the benefits of doing that. And I wanted us to close with a practice together. This is a practice that will help us to rest our focus on these points of connection, on ourselves as a part of nature in this world. The entire system of Reiki, all of the practices, all of the elements have one thing in common. They're all designed to train our minds to focus on the things that will help us to remember our true self. All of these practices include an element of focusing our mind. And so in this practice, we're going to be focusing our mind on the symmetry between our physical bodies, our emotional and mental bodies, and the natural world. Okay, let's jump into it. So as always, when we practice, we take a few moments to settle our body, our breath, and our mind into a posture for practice. And so often that means taking a little stretch, noticing if there's anything that your body needs to feel settled, to feel comfortable. I almost always need to put a little twist in my shoulders and just move them around a bit to help them feel relaxed. What we want to do is to settle into a position that feels supported, that is upright, and also easeful. So being sure that we have enough support in the structures that we're sitting on, making sure we've stretched out our body enough that we aren't feeling rigid and tense, but rather relaxed into the natural upright structure of our bodies. And so taking a moment to find that sweet spot for yourself. And as you settle into this position, taking a few breaths with the intention that on your exhale, you can intentionally relax the muscles of your body, particularly of your shoulders, your chest, of your belly. We want to allow our body to be soft so that our breath can move freely in and out of the body, encouraging the breath to move down into the belly rather than staying high in the chest. We often, in our fast-paced modern life, get in the habit of breathing high in the chest, of keeping the muscles of our belly tight and armored up, which restricts the breath from moving low. This has a lot of physiological impacts on our body and on our mental state. And so when we practice, we want to practice relaxing the belly, inviting the breath to move lower into our body. When we do this enough intentionally in practice, it becomes habitual in our daily life. I'm at the point where I'm often breathing low into my belly, allowing my belly to be soft when I'm just going through my daily life, and there's tremendous benefit to doing that. And so we practice that here, just noticing where your breath moves in your body. Perhaps placing a hand on your belly to invite the breath to move low. If this feels like a struggle for you, if your breath is staying high in your chest, then this is the extent of your practice today. Just being with your breath, practicing your relaxing your belly, inviting the breath to move lower in your body. And doing this aligns our body and our breath together to put us in a posture for practice. One of the foundational principles within the system of Reiki, within its Shinto origins, is the principle of Sanmitsu, the three mysteries of our body, our breath, and our mind. And that our pathway to enlightenment, our pathway to remembering our true self, comes through the unification of these three essential aspects of ourself. And so in every practice, we begin there. And so with our body and our breath aligned for practice, we can bring our mind into this alignment by resting your attention on the sensation of the breath moving in and down into the body, allowing that sensation, that movement of the breath to draw your attention inward, to call your attention back from all the places you've spent it today. And as much as you can, focus your mind, your attention on just this simple sensation of the breath moving in and down into the belly, into the middle of your body, and then gently back up and out. So let's just take a few breaths, practicing resting the mind on this sensation of moving the breath in and out in a natural way. And as we align our mind with our body and breath for practice, this draws our attention down into the first diamond, the low belly, the energy center found at the very center of our body in the low belly, connected to the earth, connected to our physical body, our rooted and grounded place. We always begin here, beginning with our foundation, our resourced, centered place, the home of our true self, the first diamond. And with your attention resting here, being welcomed home into this centered place, I invite you to begin to imagine the form of a great tree before you. Just getting a sense of this great tree, either by visualizing it in your mind's eye or sensing it with your body, holding it in your memory, whatever works for you, to bring forward a great tree. Noticing the wide expanse of its roots, reaching wide and reaching deep into the earth. The great trunk arising from these roots, connecting the ground below to the spaciousness above, where the branches reach out and up as far and wide as the roots below, in a beautiful symmetry. Now I invite you to begin to notice the symmetry between this great tree before you and your own body, your feet rooted to the ground, your toes nestling into the nourishing soil. If you've ever walked barefoot on the ground, on the soil or the grass, perhaps remembering that tingling sensation, the energy of the earth connecting with your body, with your roots. With your first diamond, your grounded and rooted place. And as you feel into this connection, perhaps even imagining the body of that tree coming into your own body, the roots of your toes, the strands of energy that move from your feet into the earth in beautiful alignment with the roots of this tree. Continuing to breathe in and down into your belly, allowing your belly to expand with your breath. And as you exhale, gently releasing your breath. And on your next round of breath, as you exhale, begin to bring your attention upwards from your roots, up to your head, up to your arms, perhaps even stretching your arms wide like the branches of the tree. Feeling the wide open spaciousness above. Feeling the way that your reach is in direct proportion to how deeply and broadly rooted you are. Bringing our attention up into the second diamond in the head, this place of wide openness, of spaciousness, of vision, of possibility, our connection to the above and beyond places, the universe, space, the star fields above and around us. Feeling the way that just like a tree, the more securely rooted we are, connected to the earth that nourishes us and sustains us, the more that the element of air can draw our attention upward and out, making room for more possibility, making space inside of us to hold all of the feelings that we have, all of the experiences we have, feeling like there's room inside of us to hold all of it. Continuing to breathe in and down into your belly. And as you breathe out, drawing your attention up. Let's follow this breath pattern for a few rounds, allowing our attention to move between our rooted place and our belly and our feet as we inhale. And as we exhale, shifting our attention up to our head, to our outstretched arms, to the spaces above and beyond. Let's take a few breaths, just shifting our attention between these two places, the first diamond and the second diamond, in the belly and in the head. Our inhale into our belly, our exhale up to the branches, the reach at our head. And finally, on your next inhale, drawing your attention to your heart. this place of compassionate connection, the trunk of the tree that connects the rooted places with the reaching places, the roots with the branches. This place of compassionate connection, the place where our humanity really comes home, the territory of the heart is like the trunk of the tree, both connecting the whole system together and also supported by it, moving resources throughout the whole system. Let's just take a few breaths with our attention here in the heart. And then when you feel ready, giving yourself a gesture of completion and coming back into this space together. So friends, I invite you to do a little bit of journaling with that practice, just capturing for yourself what came up in words or images or gestures. Also be a great time for you to take a walk. Go outside, maybe get your feet in the grass. Go have a direct interaction with the natural world in some way and notice how it impacts your body, your mind, your heart, how it impacts the rest of your day. It's almost funny sometimes how simple this idea is, that it's good for us to pay attention to nature, to be in relationship with nature. And yet it is so profoundly impactful for us to actually live our life on a day-to-day basis, paying attention to these things. It's one of the most important and powerfully healing things that you can do for yourself. And so as we move from this place together, I invite you to find a way to be with these ideas today, to be with nature in some way that feels accessible and authentic to you, and then to notice how it feels, how it impacts your day, and let me know. I'd love to hear about it. We will be back next month for another Sweet Taste of Heartscapes on our next topic, which I haven't decided yet. So keep an eye out for those notifications. They happen the first Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And I hope that you can join us for our next round. Until then, as you move from this place, as you go out into the world and observe your relationship with it, may you be deeply provisioned for that journey. Thanks for being with me. Until next time, I love you. Goodbye.